All right, now I believe we're recording. And to everybody who's just joined us, we are just kicking off this Encore presentation of getting to the marks, looking at mark navigation in Tableau with Blake Burgess and Bella Jiang.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Roshni, for the reminder. I will go back and reshare the agenda screen just so we're on the same page. So just quickly, we're going to cover 5 areas today. So we're going to talk about the problem space, then we're going to define the key terms. I'm going to pass it to Bella. She's going to do a demo and then talk about our tenets or our principles for how we make choices as we're building these experiences, what worked and what didn't. And then lastly, I'll finish us off with some customer feedback, what's next, and how you can help.
You may need to show that forward-looking statement just for corporate purposes now that we're recording.
Okay. Since we're recording, I'm going to go back to the forward-looking statement as well. So as a reminder, Salesforce and Tableau are publicly trading companies, and as such, it is important that you make purchasing decisions based off of the features currently in the product and not any forward-looking features that Bella and I will be showing you today. And I'll just go ahead and go through it again. So my name's Blake Burgess. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a product management director for accessibility at Salesforce Tableau. I'm a white man with blonde hair wearing a blue shirt that has the Futures Accessible on it. Presenting with me today is the incredibly talented Bella Jiang. She is an engineer on our Viz rendering team. She is an Asian woman with long black hair wearing a black shirt. All right, so as we dive in today, the first section that we're going to talk about is the problem space. So I think for most folks who attend this TUG, you're probably familiar with the ways in which you can control the accessibility of your visualizations. Examples include things like picking palettes that have good color contrast that take into account people with color deficiencies, using both shapes and colors to signify information, including robust and context-rich titles, captions, and more. But that only gets you so far when the marks and visualizations themselves are not accessible. Historically, people who have been unable to use a mouse have not been able to explore data in an accessible way. Things like tooltips and all of the marks required hover, making it really difficult for, and if not impossible, for someone who wasn't able to use the mouse. So we also know that there are parts of Tableau that are difficult for everyone to use, even if you can use a mouse. An example on the screen today is a map of San Diego. And what you might notice about this map is some of the dots are overlapping. And so in some of those marks, even when you're using a mouse, if you take a mouse and run it over this in Tableau, what happens is that you're not able to, with confidence, understand which mark you're hovering over. So to understand what would be a good experience, what we did is we created a co-design study through the partnership of the University of Washington, focused on people who are blind or low vision. And the goal of the study was to understand what would make a good experience for someone navigating using assistive technology. In part, we created a service called Azimuth that would take Tableau visualizations and re-render them in an accessible fashion. It also would generate summaries of the experience, so telling them information about the visualizations and what had changed. And it was interesting to do this because as we partnered with people with disabilities to understand what would work, some of our assumptions about what would make it accessible were incorrect. And some of the things that we thought would be useful, like very robust descriptions, weren't as useful as just letting people get to the marks and explore. So after this research, we knew that we didn't just want to consume a visualization and describe it. It would be really easy to apply something like a AI model that takes in information about a visualization and spits out a description. Unfortunately, that doesn't answer the problem of accessibility. It's still keeping people out of that equitable exploration that we want everyone to be able to experience when they use Tableau. So instead, we knew that we needed to get everyone into the visualization exactly as it was built by the author, so that there wasn't a layer of translation or description being put in between a customer and a visualization by Tableau or anyone else. So there are a few key terms to understand as we talk about this work. First, I want to talk about the types of visualizations that we have. Internally, we use two terms to talk about visualizations, and they describe a visualization in terms of reading order. So our first bucket is what's called a linear visualization, and these are visualizations that have a natural reading order. A great example of this would be a text table. There is a correct way to read that. It is determined based off of the heading structure. And in general, in most places, it's going to be read right to left, left to right, top to bottom. So in those visualizations, we call those linear visualizations. Some additional examples of those include bar charts, line graphs, heat maps, and more. Then we have visualizations where there is no correct reading order. An example on the screen is this map of San Diego that shows lots of dots marks all over the place. And in this case, there is no right or wrong way to read this map. What I mean by that is you could start north of San Diego and I could start south, and we could cross paths in the middle and continue our exploration and both have the same takeaways and understandings as someone who is reading it from east to west or vice versa. In general, these include vises that have both more than one axis and those that have no axis or headers. Some examples of these include maps, scatter plots, pack bubble charts, and more. Taking this down a level, each visualization is made of parts. And to help you understand our work, we thought it was important to focus a little bit on the parts of a visualization. So the combo chart that I have on the screen has a line graph and a bar chart. And for most people, you would assume that this is all one piece. But in actuality, there are multiple panes that make up this visualization. And a pane is defined as the segment of the UI that contains a data visualization. Tableau, when we render these, sort of stitches the panes together and makes it visually look like one experience, but it's actually multiple panes. Next, taking it down a level from the overall viz experience, we have the marks. And the marks are individual data points in a visualization. I think we're all familiar with that. And then lastly, two key frames of reference that we need as we process visualizations are axes and headers. These help us understand and put context into the information in the marks that we're seeing. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bella, who's going to do a demo and then take you through our work.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. Let me share my screen first. Great. So now let's see this in action. Okay. In general, we are going to deliver mark navigation in 3 different phases. In 24.1 and 24.2, we have delivered mark navigation for a simple text table and for some more complex linear visualization, such as bar chart and line chart. And in next release, which is 24.3, we are going to deliver mark navigation for all nonlinear visualizations, which includes maps and scatter plots. Okay, so now let's start with a simple text table. So here we are on the viz area. By pressing the Enter key, we can step into the viz level navigation. And on this level, we can use arrow keys to move to the head area and the mark area. When we are on the mark area, by pressing the Enter key again, we can step into the mark level navigation and start to use arrow keys to move to various marks in the viz. And one thing I want to mention here is in pursuit of navigation efficiency, we allowed a direct arrow movements between the head elements and the mark elements. For example, here we are on an edge mark with the subcategory data paper. So by pressing a left arrow keys, we can directly jump into the paper header elements in the header area. And if we press the right arrow keys, we can easily go back to the previous edge mark. And that means there's no boundaries between these two areas in terms of keyboard navigation. Okay, and in 24.2, we start to enable mark navigation for more complex linear visualizations, such as bar chart and line chart. This one is a single pane line chart. And in this example, I want to give you a quick introduction on the navigation structure that we use to support mark level navigation. So for this view, we basically implemented 4 different buckets: central, east, south, and west. And then we distributed all the mark in the viz into these 4 buckets and internally ranked the mark in each bucket based on its south axis value. So for example, here in the central bucket, the green mark has the rank value 1, and the red mark has the rank value 2. Okay, so now let's step into the mark level navigation. During the mark level navigation, arrow key left right will navigate to a mark in a different bucket, while arrow key up down will navigate within the same bucket, but to a mark with a different rank. So now we are on the red mark in the central bucket. Then by pressing a right arrow keys, we will jump to a different bucket. So here is the east bucket. And as we can see, we are moving to the mark with the same color instead of the same rank. So why are we doing this? That's because we prioritize the internal data relationship during this between bucket movements. And in these scenarios, all the marks with the same color basically means they have a closer internal data relationship with each other. Specifically, the mark in the red color have the same ship mode data second class in this graph. And we believe by doing this, we can improve the intuitiveness of movements because we will always try to jump to the mark with similar data when we jump to a different bucket. Okay, so let's move to the last view. In the next release, we are going to deliver mark navigation for all nonlinear visualizations. And map is one of the nonlinear viz types that can typically contain hundreds of marks in the viz. And that means it can take hundreds of steps for our users to navigate from the top left marks to the bottom right marks, which is very inefficient. So how can we solve this problem? We determined to implement an extra navigation layer between the viz level navigation and the mark level navigation. So here we are on the viz level navigation. By pressing the Enter key, we can step into the focus rect level navigation. Sorry, I think I used the wrong.
Bella, since you're taking a breath there, can you do us a favor and just slow down a smidge because it's a little hard for us to keep up with you.
Yes. Let me think.
Just take a breath. Slow down a little.
Yeah.
I know that you've got a lot to get through, but it's a little hard.
I think I set up the wrong code base because we are using a prototype for this. 1 second, let me think about this. Give me 1 second. I should be able to log into my remote desktop and use my code there. Sorry about that. I should have just set this up before this presentation because I have a lot of meeting this morning, so I'm so sorry. Okay. Let me start reverse proxy. Okay.
This is the gremlins of live demos. People were super excited. So we had lots of folks come up to our session after the keynote. So we were lucky enough to be able to talk to a lot of people who use this directly and get some feedback, which was exciting to see. We also had the opportunity to talk to some folks who had some frustrations. And so it was really a good opportunity to get that customer feedback. Bella, if you want, I can share the version I have on QA Near and just go through the map version quickly, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so why don't you stop sharing your screen and I'll take over. So sorry, we just get gremlins. Bella does a fantastic job of demonstrating this, and I want to make sure that we reflect that. So as we go through the viz, what you'll notice is we can hit the tab key to move forward in the visualization. When we get down to the visualization, we hit enter, which gives you all of the information about the visualization again, and then we hit enter again so that well, it is not working, so that you are able to navigate the marks.
Yeah, so that's why we are not delivered this in prod yet. So
Yeah.
that's why I need to do a reverse proxy, and I used the wrong code base. So
That's okay.
It's okay. I can do this.
You just keep going. So I'm going to talk to them about it. So the reason why we chose to use the enter key as opposed to tab is that when we render a visualization, it's not really in the DOM. So if you were to run a scan over Tableau, you're going to get a lot of errors in your like Axe or Google Lighthouse report because of the markup of the visualization. It's basically a canvas that has a lot of information squished inside of it and then rendered as a flat image. But we were slightly inspired by that because we felt like instead of trying to force this to, hack it to make it feel like there's different levels and using tab to go through all of the marks, we instead tried to be very flat about the experience. So what that means is that we're treating it like entering a navigation mode, which keeps you very neatly and cleanly inside the pane. So hitting enter, what that does is it brings up a focus rectangle. And the focus rectangle, we're going to all use our imaginations on this map of the United States, is right now a not configurable square that allows you to move in a grid fashion from directionally in a predictive way. So when this is in production, what you would see is a square over Washington State, and by hitting the right arrow, this square is going to move to the east, and so it will let you know that you're moving east. If you get to say Minnesota and start hitting down, it's going to let you know that you are moving south. And if you keep moving east and say we get to our friends in Florida and you want to explore those visualizations, once you get to that level, if you hit enter again, you're now at the marks level. And what that lets you do is explore all of the marks inside of that focus rectangle and activate the tooltips. So once you're in that focus rectangle level, we're going to start you at the top left of that rectangle and sort of move you around it in a predictable fashion. Every time you hit a mark, it's going to open the tooltip and announce it via a screen reader. So that's super helpful for all users, particularly in an example like this, where you'll notice as I'm hovering, like maybe you can, I can't tell what area I'm trying to get to versus what area I'm actually getting to. So the nice thing is that this experience will make it better for everyone, because everyone will with confidence be able to understand which mark they're cycling through and which sequence they're going through. So exactly, Blake, congested marks are really frustrating to everyone from a hover perspective. And so this is an example of universal design that in focusing on people with disabilities, we're solving this ubiquitous problem for all of our customers. Bella, how are you feeling about things? Are you able to share?
I'm just open the video that we have for showing.
Okay, perfect. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. This one. Okay. In next release, we are going to deliver mark navigation for all nonlinear viz types. And map is one of the nonlinear viz types that can typically contain hundreds of marks in the viz. And that means it can take hundreds of steps for our users to navigate from the top left mark to the bottom right marks. And that is very inefficient. So how can we solve this problem? We determined to implement an extra navigation layers between the viz level navigation and the mark level navigation. So here we are on the viz level navigation. By pressing the Enter key, we can step into the focus track level navigation. And then we can use arrow keys to move to the area that we are most interested in. And then by pressing the Enter key again, we can step into the mark level navigation. And if we want to look into the data in different areas, we can press the Escape key to go back to the focus track level and move to a different area for further investigation. Okay, so that is some recording that we have when we previously present this prototype. We have some technical issue today, but we will see this. We'll definitely see this delivered in next release, so everyone can play with it when it's ready. Okay, let's change to. I think I need to go back to my slides. So, seconds.
While Bella is doing that, I want to answer Brandon's question. Yes, this does work with a screen reader, and it will announce. Right now, it announces tooltips that are there. We are, I believe, 24.3, keep me honest, Bella and Caitlin, updating it so that even when tooltips are turned off, if you have a screen reader on, it will announce the information in the tooltips because that is necessary to provide context to that navigation experience.
Thanks, Blake. Okay. So in the next session, I'm going to explain some key factors that we use to determine some important choices for our keyboard navigation. And here's the list of the key factors guiding our choices. And the first one is the predictability. So basically, people need to know which mark they will move to before they actually press the key. And also, they want to make sure that they will always move to the same mark by taking the same action. And reversibility is also very important. We want to ensure that every movement is reversible so that our users can efficiently navigate both forward and backwards through elements. Third is consistency. It's important to maintain a consistent navigation experience across various viz types in order to reduce the cognitive load when we navigate through different marks. And the last one is the efficiency and intuitiveness. In general, we want to provide an efficient and intuitive navigation experience for a better user experience. Okay. And now I'm going to explain how these keywords come into place and influence our product decisions through an example. In this example, I want to discuss the movement logic for nonlinear visualizations. And here we present a scatter plot, which is a classic example of nonlinear visualizations. Question posed is, starting from the mark A, which mark should we move to by pressing an up arrow key? Okay. By looking to this example, I believe some of us will think that we should navigate to mark S because that seems the only mark that is actually above mark A in this graph. So the movement logic here is to prioritize the directional information up, and that seems reasonable at this point. Well, let's slightly change the question here. Starting from mark S, which mark should we move to by pressing a down arrow key? If we use the same logic and prioritize the directional information down, then we will naturally move to mark E because that's the mark that is directly below mark S in this graph. However, that introduced a new question. How can we navigate back to mark A from the mark S? Okay, so obviously this movement is not reversible. Although it takes only one step for us to navigate from mark A to mark S, it cannot achieve a one-step return from mark S back to mark A. In fact, we may never be able to navigate back to mark A by pressing the down arrow keys only. Although technically someone can navigate back to mark A by pressing the left arrow keys, we don't think that can be a good solution considering two key factors here. And the first one is the predictability. So now let me give you 10 seconds so that you can close your eyes and think if you can navigate back to Mark A without actually seeing the graph. Okay, now maybe some of you have noticed that there's no easy way for our screen reader users to determine which keys they need to press and how many times they need to press the key to navigate back to Mark A in this case. So the navigation path is very unpredictable for our screen reader users, which can pose great challenges for them to backtrack effectively. And the second thing here is the backward efficiency. So in real life, a scatter plot can contain hundreds of marks in the viz. And that means potentially it can take hundreds of steps for us to navigate from Mark S back to Mark A. So one step from A to S, but hundreds of steps from S back to A. That seems a very bad user experience, right? Okay, so how can we solve this problem? Instead of using the directional information, we determine to rank all the mark in the viz based on its position values. So pressing the up arrow keys will navigate to a mark with an increased rank value in the Y direction, or pressing the down arrow keys will navigate back to a previous mark with a decreased rank value. And these solutions can help improve the predictability and reversibility in movements, as demonstrated in this graph. Okay, so that concludes my section today. And now I'm going to hand it over to Blake to discuss more about our customer feedbacks and future plan. Blake, back to you.
Thanks so much, Bella. So, we always want to, end these sessions with talking about what's coming next, and most importantly, how you can help. So first, I wanted to share our one of our fearless leaders, Colin Smith, who was gracious enough to walk through the experience with us and share some feedback. And I'm going to go ahead and read it to make sure that everyone has access to Colin's quote. So it says, visualization navigation is a huge step forward for accessibility in Tableau. The feature is true universal design, providing improved interface navigation for all, while making certain features such as tooltips available to people with motor and visual impairments for the first time. I think everyone knows Colin, but Colin Smith is the core consultant at the Information Lab. And so I want to call out one thing that Colin said, which is that it is universal design. Our goal is really to make sure that we are building things in a way that focus on people with disabilities and still benefit everyone. So this is a quote I pulled off of LinkedIn from a customer who talks about how much he loves the experience of navigating text tables with keyboard only. One of the things that he mentions is that it's really frustrating that our tooltips rely on hover, because if you need to do something else with your mouse, like take a screenshot, you might lose that tooltip in your screenshot, which is really frustrating. But now navigating with arrow keys gives you the affordance of having that tooltip and being able to use your mouse to get the screenshots. So that's an example very similar to a curve cut, right? Where building and focusing on people with disabilities benefits everyone. In the example of a curb cut, while those were created with people who use wheelchairs in mind, it benefits someone using a stroller, someone wheeling luggage, skateboarding, etc. It creates an affordance that everyone can use by hyper focusing on the needs of people with disabilities first. So what's next? Well, it's not enough to just explore the data. People with disabilities need to be able to take the same actions on a visualization as everyone else. And that's one of our first priorities after we launch visualizations. What this means is that someone should be able to have the same access using the actions in a tooltip as a mouse user could. So things like keeping and excluding data and more. We intend to use the space key to toggle through those selections and arrows to go back and forth through those. After that, we want to work on what we call smoothness. So the first section of that is mouse and keyboard transitions. So right now, the way that the experience is built, if you are navigating on a text table, say, and you're in the middle and you move your mouse to go check on something else, when you come back to the experience, you have to start the navigation at the beginning again. That's frustrating, particularly in an experience like Tableau, where a text table could have 100 lines, right? So our goal is to work on ensuring that we are able to pass back and forth from clicked marks, so that if you selected a mark and then accidentally bumped your mouse or moved it intentionally, when you come back to navigation, we would start you off where you should be. Excuse me. After that, we want to get to all of our squashed items. Again, if you think of a visualization kind of like a sandwich, right? So we take lots of images, we make the sandwich and we render it. It looks very flat. And when we make that sandwich, we squash things in between. So examples include annotations, box plots, background images, and more. Well, those are still a core part of exploring and understanding visualizations. And our goal is to ensure that everyone is able to have access to those pieces of the viz as well. So the most important thing you can do outside of joining the TUG, which you all have successfully completed thing one, is to send us our feedback. We really want to know what you love, what you hate, what you would do differently, and how you'd like us to see, how you'd like us to grow this feature. So this is my real email address. And I firmly believe there's no such thing as too much feedback. Generally, I will respond to you in 1 business day, letting you know that I have your feedback and probably asking you some questions and maybe even setting up time to talk. I really think it's important for us to be very close to you, our community and customers, as we continue to refine and do this. As Bella and I have shared, through this journey, we work to create guiding tenets for how we would make our decisions, and then use those tenets based off of research to make decisions as we've gone. But we also want to be humble and authentic in this and acknowledge that we may have gotten things wrong, or there might be another way to do this. And so as the feature continues to launch in phases and you get your hands on it, we're super excited for you to let us know how you feel about it and what you would love to see more, less of, and differently. So with that, we have a lot of our TC conversation, but I just want to end with thank you, and then leaving some time. It looks like we have about 19 minutes for any questions that you might have. I see a few in the chat, so I was going to just go ahead and start reading those off. I believe the first one that we haven't answered yet is from Nicole Kraft, who says, if a screen reader reads a tooltip, even if it's not shown, does it read the hidden tooltip, or does the screen reader base it solely on the value of the mark? So basically what it will do is it's going to read the content, that the metadata that is used to create a tooltip. So it's going to give someone who's using assistive technology the information that would be generated in a tooltip, but not necessarily hidden information. Michael asks, so the tooltip will remain static on the screen while you navigate with the arrows. So once you hit some mark, the tooltip is going to open and persist. But once you start navigating with the arrows away, the tooltip will go away and the next tooltip for the next mark you get to will open. So there should not be a scenario where you are on, say, mark A in Ohio with a tooltip open and then run the experience down to Florida and then have a second tooltip open, or even worse, a tooltip for Ohio being announced while you're in Florida. So our goal is to make sure that the tooltips are responsive to the arrow movement. So once the tooltip is opened, if you don't hit any keys, the tooltip will stay. The minute you hit an arrow key, the tooltip is going to close and move you forward and follow along in your experience. Angie Seckler, I hope that's the right way to say that. I apologize if it's incorrect, asks, will this also work with text boxes in a Viz 2? yes, we should be picking up all of the floating experiences. So anything that's not part of the core visualization, if it is not being caught by assistive technology today, we have a pretty robust list of those. We will be ensuring that they are connected back to the experience, navigable and announced. Let's see. So Roshni asks, will this be part of a beta pre-release preview? No, so we are not going to mark this in beta. We are just doing it live. So it is going out as we have customer value. The reason why we've broken it out in these 3 phases, so to answer Brandon's question, the first phase was 24.1. So this is live. Anyone on a client rendered viz online can navigate that using can navigate text tables using assistive technology or anything other than a mouse. In 24.2, which I believe is the June-ish timeline, we'll get to all of the linear visualizations. And then 24.3, which I believe is our winter timeline. Sorry, I'm horrible with remembering dates, but I expect it around the holiday season for like November, December, I believe, maybe January, but I believe November, December. That will pick up all of the visualizations that are left, right? So basically, internally, we have a logic that allows us to sort of, if then, it's not quite that cleanly, but if it's not linear, then it's going to be nonlinear. And that's sort of how we consider these 2 visualizations in terms of making decisions. To pick up some of the additional questions, Shannon Aling asks, is the number of focus rectangles standard or the number of based on the number of marks? So the focus rec is fairly standard. We decided not to over-engineer the focus rectangle now because we knew that there are lots of ways to do it. So there are other BI products that the focus rectangle is the shape of the state. There are others where the navigation experience goes in alphabetical order, not geographical order, right? So we decided to emphasize prioritizing the order and predictability of navigation and having a standard focus rec experience. I've already had lots of customer conversations about, can I change the color? Can I change the size? Can you make it different per user, right? So I think there's some really exciting future looking things that we can look at in terms of, continuing to refine. But to be transparent, we chose not to overbuild the focus rect experience until we had a large group of users and customers using the experience and giving us feedback. So I think I hit most of the questions in the chat. So with our last 10 minutes, I wanted to just open it up to the floor and see if there are any additional questions that maybe I missed or are top of mind for you. Oh, I just caught one. So Michael Crow reads or says, very helpful. In multi-level viz nav, what key do we press to step out of one level? So you're just going to hit escape and you're going to go up the level. So if you're in focus rec and you're at the marks and you want to come back up to the exploration level or wayfinding level of the focus rec, if you hit the escape button, it brings you back up from the marks into the focus rectangle. So we've really tried to not use any special hotkeys or combo keys. We've tried to keep it as simple and as aligned with both keyboard navigation standards and screen reader standards as possible. We felt strongly in building this that we shouldn't build our own key sets for this or our own hotkeys, and really wanted to try and make it as intuitive as possible. Again, we also want to be humble about this and acknowledge that there's probably room for change, and that's where your feedback comes in, right? So if after a few months of using this, we're all like, wow, Blake, we really don't like the whole escape button and wish it were this thing. The beauty of this work is that changing the action keys aren't necessarily that difficult, and so that is an area that we could consider for future roadmap improvement. So Colin says, would mark navigation be any different if the designer used measured names, measured values to separate the marks versus putting a field on color? To my knowledge, no, but I'm sure Bella and Caitlin know more about Tableau and have forgotten more about it than I know. So Bella, Caitlin, do you have any thoughts on Colin's question?
I think the navigation experience will be pretty similar. Depends
Okay.
for different designs.
Yeah, it's interesting because like from a designer standpoint, like those are pretty different ways to construct, you know, like a line chart with two different color lines.
Right.
But from the actual navigation, it's the same, which I think is probably the better choice there, you know, with like keeping the value of consistency and all that.
And our goal with doing that, just to provide a little more context, is we realize that very few authors are going to be accessibility experts, right? So in fact, I would assume that a lot of authors aren't aware of accessibility. And so I think the opportunity here and the reason why we've chose not to make this editable or configurable by authors is there's a lot of risk in doing that when your author isn't an accessibility expert. So we've sort of taken that out of the control of the author. We haven't changed anything in terms of if you know the tricks on how to change the focus order and things like that. We're not overriding that or changing any of it, but we're working to create a very standard slate of these are the experiences for navigation all up. So it looks like Lisa asked a question, are there reps from ACB or NFB who test these features or have provided feedback? So internally, we have employees with disabilities who have gotten their hands on this. And we also work with some partner customers who have used the feature and informed the experience. As you know, we're on a long accessibility journey. And unfortunately, there's some peaks and valleys in the product that wouldn't make it necessarily equitable to say give someone a license for their time. So our goal is to be iterative about this and get feedback from customers as we launch the feature with time bookmarked to do those improvements later. I hope that answers your question, Lisa. And then Emily asks about the accessibility of URLs, and John hit it right on the nose. So actions are next once we finish navigation. We realize that navigating is just the start and not the end of this journey. It was probably the more complex part of the journey. And now when we get to actions, I think what is going to be an interesting problem for us to solve is as someone makes decisions to filter, not filter, keep data, exclude data, how that impacts the navigation journey and how we handle those announcements. So what we do as we build these things is we include UX designers, technical writers, and other accessibility SMEs or subject matter experts outside of our team to provide perspective. I think we've written probably 30 documents or more about this experience and have them reviewed broadly across Tableau so that we get not just the perspective of accessibility, but also some of those super user features in the product that could be very easy to miss. I feel like I've talked a lot. We've got about 7 minutes left. I want to make sure Colin and Emily, if you have anything to close us out with, but I did just want to do one last call for any final questions or anything that didn't make sense.
Blake, I have one question, and I'm not sure where, like, if you can share it or not, but can you share like a high level accessibility roadmap so that way we could see, like, or maybe it's out there and I just haven't seen it, and if so, I apologize for asking.
No, happy to talk through our roadmap and how we think about work. So in general, we think about accessibility in two buckets of work. I like to call them pebbles and boulders. So on the pebble side, we have accessibility defects, and we are informed using our external audits that power our accessibility conformance reports, and work to address those across the company. So this year we are working on both viewing and authoring for cloud and server, and have already in the first release addressed 33% of those defects in some way. Sometimes it's the product has grown beyond what the auditor saw, so it's not a defect anymore. A lot of times though, it's something that we are able to go ahead and resolve ourselves. So in the Pebbles path, you should start seeing, I would say, a lot of improvement in 24.2 and even more in 24.3 as we continue to address those. On the feature side, we've been very focused on navigation. To sort of rewind our journey last year, we didn't have any alt text. Authors couldn't edit it, and no one could navigate. So we sort of started at the lowest common denominator by adding automated alt text in 23.1. Then in 23.2, we added the ability to edit it on cloud and server. And 23.3, we brought that to desktop. In parallel, behind the scenes, we were doing the research and working on the features for navigation. So now we're kind of in our navigation era, where this year we're very focused on getting folks to be able to explore data without a mouse. As we move into next year, we will continue to look at expanding the navigation experience from just navigation into taking actions. And so that will take us through most of next year, because we have 3 releases and very cleanly 3 buckets of work that we need to do next year on the feature side. First being actions, then smoothness, and as we like to call them, our floating layers, our floating objects. So that's kind of our feature roadmap for the next year. The good news about this iterative approach and why we feel pretty strongly about doing it this way is because we're already thinking about and working on the next thing. It gives you time to use what we're launching and give us feedback so that we can continue to seed the roadmap. So I can foresee where in 26.1 we're working on configurable accessibility settings where you edit the focus indicator colors or things like that, right? So I think the nice thing about this process is there's always room to continue to add new boulders to the pile. I hope that helps, Emily.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. I was just typing that in there. Thank you for the work that you and your team are doing, because it's really phenomenal to see all of the progress that's been made since you've come on board, Blake. So, and I know that that has a lot to do with you and also the development team. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, for your kind words of support and encouragement. I'm really extremely proud of the hard work our engineering teams and our designers and technical writers and solutions engineers have done. I'm lucky enough to get to be the guy who everyone sees and knows, but I'm kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Lots of other people do a lot of very hard things to make this happen. And so we're really excited about this, and I can't emphasize enough how much we want your feedback, good, bad, and otherwise, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work for you, none of this matters.
Right. Well, that feels like a pretty good place to leave this. There were a couple more questions in the chat about hotkeys and CVD. Maybe those can be forwarded to an email. But yeah, I just dropped the channel. In case you didn't know, we post these recordings to the Team DataFam YouTube channel. So if you ever want to see this one or past accessibility tugs, those are all available there, including the last one, which had a great presentation from Frank Golowski, if you weren't able to make that in person. To wrap up, yeah, it's a super exciting time to be an accessibility practitioner in Tableau, because of all the work you all are doing. So thank you all for this. Thank you for the presentation. And yeah, we should have our next TUG sometime, I would say, midsummer. We typically do these quarterly. So if you are interested in presenting at the TUG, feel free to get in touch, and we'll make it happen.
Thank you so much for having an Encore one and giving us time to share this with you. We're really grateful.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next time.